Welcome back to NT Coins World, the ultimate destination for collectors and coin enthusiasts. Today, we are exploring the fascinating world of Kennedy half dollars top 4 1967 and 1973, D in 1971, D in 1992, D Kennedy half dollars coins. The obverse features the iconic portrait of President John F. Kennedy by Gilroy Roberts, while the reverse showcases Frank Gasparo's detailed presidential seal with the heraldic eagle. Even in fine condition, the coin retains clear design elements with moderate wear. Collector interest remains strong due to its historical significance, with modest market value that can increase for coins with attractive eye appeal or rare errors. 1967 Kennedy half dollar coin. Fine condition that we begin with the 1967 Kennedy half dollar, a coin born from one of the most emotional chapters in American history. The Kennedy half dollar series itself was created in response to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November 1963. The nation was in shock, mourning a leader whose presidency symbolized youth, progress, and hope. In an unprecedented move, the U.S. Mint acted quickly to honor Kennedy by replacing the Franklin half dollar with a new design bearing his portrait. The first Kennedy half dollars were released in 1964 and were immediately embraced by the public, so much so that people hoarded them as keepsakes rather than spending them. By the time 1967 arrived, the Kennedy half dollar had already become an iconic piece of American coinage. However, the mid-1960s were also a turbulent period for U.S. currency. Rising silver prices and widespread hoarding had caused a nationwide coin shortage. To address this crisis, the U.S. Mint made significant changes to coin composition and production methods, and the 1967 Kennedy half dollar sits right at the center of that transformation. The historical context of the 1967 issue is especially important because it was struck during the era of the Coinage Act of 1965. This legislation removed silver from dimes and quarters and reduced the silver content of half dollars. Instead of the 90% silver composition used in 1964, the 1967 Kennedy half dollar was made of a 40% silver-clad composition, with silver bonded to a copper core. This makes the coin both a circulating piece of U.S. history and a precious metal collectible. Another key historical detail is that 1967 Kennedy half dollars do not carry mint marks. During 1965, 1966, and 1967, the U.S. Mint intentionally removed mint marks from coins to discourage collectors from hoarding specific mint issues. Instead, all 1967 half dollars were struck at the San Francisco Mint, though they carry no S mint mark. This unique feature adds intrigue and makes the 1967 issue instantly recognizable to knowledgeable collectors. Moving on to design features. The obverse of the 1967 Kennedy half dollar features a powerful left-facing portrait of John F. Kennedy, designed by Chief Engraver Gilroy Roberts. The image captures Kennedy's confident profile with sharp detail in the hair, jawline, and facial contours. Surrounding the portrait are the inscriptions "Liberty" along the top and "In God We Trust" split on either side of Kennedy's neck, with the date 1967 below. Even in fine condition, the strength of this design remains impressive. The reverse, created by Frank Gasparo, displays the presidential seal. A heraldic eagle with wings spread wide holds an olive branch and a bundle of arrows, symbolizing peace and strength. A shield rests on the eagle's chest, while stars encircle the design, representing the states of the Union. The inscriptions "United States of America" and "half dollar" frame the image. The reverse is rich with symbolism, and in fine condition, the eagle's feathers, shield lines, and stars remain clearly visible. In fine condition, a 1967 Kennedy half dollar shows moderate, even wear on the highest points of the design. On the obverse, this includes Kennedy's hair above the ear and the cheekbone. On the reverse, where appears on the eagle's breast and wing tips. Despite this wear, all major details remain strong, and the coin retains a pleasing, honest circulated appearance that many collectors appreciate. Let's talk about mintage, because this plays a big role in availability and collector interest. The 1967 Kennedy half dollar had a very large mintage, with hundreds of millions struck. This high production number was necessary to relieve the coin shortage at the time. However, large mintage does not mean unlimited supply today. Many of these coins were melted for their silver content over the decades, while others were heavily circulated and damaged. As a result, attractive fine-condition examples are not as common as raw mintage figures might suggest. When it comes to market value, the 1967 Kennedy half-dollar benefits from its silver content. Even in worn condition, it carries intrinsic value based on silver prices. In fine condition, the coin typically trades above face value, often in the range influenced by current silver market trends. Collector demand can push values higher, especially for coins with appealing surfaces, even toning, and minimal marks. While it may not be a rare coin in the traditional sense, it holds steady, reliable value and remains a staple in silver and Kennedy collections. One of the most exciting areas for collectors is errors and varieties. The 1967 Kennedy half-dollar is known to exist with several interesting mint errors, including doubled dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and die cracks. Some examples show doubling in the lettering or date, while others exhibit dramatic striking anomalies. Because quality control was under pressure during the coin shortage era, errors slipped through more frequently than in some later years. Authentic error coins can command strong premiums, especially when clearly visible and well-preserved. Collector interest in the 1967 Kennedy half-dollar remains strong and multi-layered. Silver stackers value it for its precious metal content. Kennedy collectors appreciate it as part of the transitional silver-clad era. History enthusiasts are drawn to its connection to a pivotal moment in American memory. For many collectors, this coin represents a bridge between classic silver coinage and modern circulating currency. In fine condition, the 1967 Kennedy half-dollar tells a complete story, not just of Kennedy, but of a nation adapting to economic change, honoring its leaders, and reshaping its money. It is a coin that deserves respect, attention, and a place in any serious U.S. coin collection. 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar coin. Fine condition. Now let's move forward a few years to a very different chapter in Kennedy half-dollar history. The 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar, a coin that marks the transition into a fully modern era of U.S. coinage and carries its own unique collector appeal. By 1973, the Kennedy half-dollar had been in circulation for nearly a decade. The emotional intensity that surrounded its original release had settled, and the coin was no longer hoarded at the same level as earlier silver issues. However, the 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar is significant because it represents a time when half-dollars were slowly disappearing from everyday commerce, despite still being officially produced for circulation. The historical context of the 1973 D issue is rooted in economic and cultural shifts. Rising inflation, changes in spending habits, and the increasing use of paper currency all contributed to the decline of half-dollar usage. Although millions were minted, many Americans rarely encountered half-dollars in daily transactions. This led to a strange situation where coins were produced in large quantities but saw limited real-world circulation. The 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar was struck at the Denver Mint, indicated by the D. mint mark located on the obverse just below Kennedy's neck. Unlike earlier Kennedy half-dollars, this coin contains no silver. It is composed of a copper-nickel-clad structure, similar to modern quarters and dimes. This shift reflects the full transition away from precious metal circulating coinage and into a purely fiduciary system. In terms of design features, the obverse and reverse designs remain consistent with the Kennedy half-dollar series. Kennedy's portrait still dominates the obverse, with Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date, 1973, clearly visible. In fine condition, the facial details remain strong, and the overall appearance is clean and balanced. The reverse continues to feature the presidential seal, with the eagle, shield, stars, and inscriptions unchanged. Although the design did not evolve, subtle differences in strike quality and surface texture can be observed when comparing coins from different years and mints. Denver Mint coins from this era are known for solid strikes, and fine-condition examples often display clear feather detail and sharp lettering. A fine-condition 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar shows moderate wear but retains all major design elements. Light smoothing may be visible on Kennedy's hair and the eagle's breast, but the coin still presents well. Because many half-dollars from this period were stored in bags rather than circulated, true circulated examples with honest wear patterns are actually more interesting to some collectors than untouched, uncirculated pieces. Now let's look at mintage figures. The 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar had a high mintage, with tens of millions produced. This means the coin is not rare in terms of sheer numbers. However, collector availability is influenced by how many were saved, how many entered circulation, and how many survived in collectible condition. While uncirculated examples are fairly common due to hoarding, circulated fine-condition coins represent a different side of the coin story, one of actual use in commerce. When discussing market value, the 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar typically trades close to face value in average condition. However, fine-condition examples with attractive surfaces and minimal damage can bring modest premiums, particularly among Kennedy half-dollar collectors assembling date and mint sets. Coins with strong eye appeal or certified grades tend to perform better, even without silver content. The real excitement for collectors often lies in errors and varieties. The 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar is known to exist with a variety of mint errors, including off-center strikes, clipped planchets, weak strikes, and die cracks. Some examples show doubling in the lettering or unusual surface textures caused by minting anomalies. While dramatic errors are scarce, they are highly collectible and can elevate the value of an otherwise common coin significantly. Collector interest in the 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar has been steadily growing as more numismatists turn their attention to modern issues. As earlier silver Kennedy has become increasingly expensive, collectors often shift focus to later dates that are more affordable yet still historically meaningful. The 1973 D fits perfectly into this category, accessible, interesting, and full of potential for variety hunting. This coin also appeals to collectors who enjoy studying the evolution of U.S. currency. It represents a moment when half-dollars were still being minted in large numbers, but were fading from everyday use. In that sense, the 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar captures a quiet transition from common circulation to collector curiosity. In fine condition, the 1973 D. Kennedy half-dollar stands as a reminder that value in numismatics is not always about silver or rarity alone. Sometimes it's about context, condition, and the stories coins carry as they move through time. 1971 D. Kennedy half-dollar coin. Fine condition that we begin with the 1971 D. Kennedy half-dollar, a coin that represents a major turning point in U.S. coinage history. By 1971, the Kennedy half-dollar had already gone through dramatic changes since its introduction in 1964. Originally struck in 90% silver, then reduced to 40% silver from 1965 through 1970, the series entered a new phase in 1971. This was the year the Kennedy half-dollar officially became a copper-nickel-clad coin, removing silver entirely from regular circulation issues. That single change makes the 1971 D a key transitional coin in the series. The historical context surrounding the 1971 D issue is deeply tied to economic pressures and shifting public behavior. Rising silver prices in the 1960s had caused widespread hoarding of silver coins, forcing the U.S. Mint to rethink the composition of circulating currency. By the early 1970s, silver was no longer practical for everyday coinage. The Kennedy half-dollar, once cherished and saved, was now entering a period where it was expected to circulate normally again, though public habits had already changed. Despite the removal of silver, the half-dollar never truly regained widespread circulation. Many banks stopped ordering them regularly, and the public grew accustomed to using smaller denominations. As a result, coins like the 1971 D were minted in large numbers, but saw limited everyday use. This odd combination of high mintage and low circulation gives the 1971 D. Kennedy half-dollar a unique place in numismatic history. Looking closely at the design features, the obverse of the coin continues the iconic portrait of President John F. Kennedy, created by Gilroy Roberts. Kennedy faces left, his expression calm and resolute. The inscriptions "Liberty" arc across the top, while "In God We Trust" is split on either side of his neck. The date, 1971, appears below. In fine condition, the major details of Kennedy's hair, forehead, and profile remain visible, though light wear may be present on the highest points. The reverse, designed by Frank Gasparo, features the presidential seal. The eagle stands with wings spread wide, clutching arrows and an olive branch, symbolizing strength and peace. A shield rests on the eagle's chest, and stars surround the design. The inscriptions United States of America and $50 frame the image. In fine condition, the eagle's feathers and shield lines are still well defined, even if some smoothing is visible in the most raised areas. The Denver mint mark, represented by a D, appears on the obverse below Kennedy's neck. This mint mark is an important detail for collectors assembling dated mint sets. Denver mint Kennedy halves from the early 1970s are known for generally solid strikes, which means fine condition examples often retain strong visual appeal. When we talk about fine condition, we're describing a coin that shows moderate, even wear from circulation, but no major damage or heavy abrasions. On the 1971 D. Kennedy $50, where typically appears on Kennedy's hair above the ear and along the cheek, as well as on the eagle's breast and wing tips. Despite this wear, all lettering remains sharp and readable, and the overall design is complete and attractive. Now let's examine mintage, an important factor in understanding availability. The 1971 D. Kennedy $50 had a very high mintage, with well over 150 million coins produced. This makes it a common date in raw numbers. However, many of these coins were stored in bags or rolls and never circulated, while others were used briefly and then set aside. Over time, many coins suffered bag marks, cleaning, or damage, reducing the number of pleasing fine condition examples available to collectors. In terms of market value, the 1971 D. Kennedy $50 generally trades close to face value in average circulated condition. However, fine condition examples with smooth surfaces, minimal marks, and natural color can bring modest premiums, especially among collectors completing full Kennedy $50 sets. While it lacks silver content, demand is driven by condition, eye appeal, and the desire to represent the first year of the fully clad Kennedy $50. The real excitement for collectors often lies in errors and varieties. The 1971 D. Kennedy $50 is known to exist with a variety of minting errors, including off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, and weak strikes. Some examples show doubling in the lettering or date, while others exhibit unusual surface textures caused by minting irregularities. Because quality control standards were evolving during this period, error coins occasionally escaped into circulation. Authentic and clearly visible errors can dramatically increase a coin's value and collector interest. Collector interest in the 1971 D. Kennedy $50 continues to grow, especially among those who focus on transitional years in U.S. coinage. This coin marks the end of silver in circulating $50 and the beginning of the modern clad era. For collectors, that makes it historically important even if it's not rare in the traditional sense. It represents change, adaptation, and the evolving nature of American money. In fine condition, the 1971 D. Kennedy $50 tells a story of economic reality meeting public sentiment. It's a coin that bridges the emotional silver era and the practical modern era, making it an essential piece for understanding the full Kennedy $50 series. 1992 D. Kennedy $50 coin, fine condition. Now let's fast forward 2 decades to a very different chapter in Kennedy $50 history, the 1992 D. Kennedy $50. At first glance, this coin may seem purely modern and ordinary, but when you look deeper, it reveals a fascinating story about circulation habits, collector behavior, and the quiet evolution of U.S. coinage in the late 20th century. By 1992, the Kennedy $50 had been in production for nearly 30 years. The emotional connection to President Kennedy was still present, but the coin had largely disappeared from everyday commerce. Most Americans rarely encountered $50 in daily transactions, and many younger people had never spent one at all. Despite this, the U.S. Mint continued to produce Kennedy $50 in large quantities, primarily for collectors and limited circulation needs. The historical context of the 1992 D. Kennedy $50 is rooted in this strange contradiction. Millions of coins were minted, yet few were actually used. Banks often did not stock half dollars unless specifically requested, and many coins went straight into storage or collector hands. This makes circulated examples, including those in fine condition, more interesting than many people realize, because they represent coins that actually saw real-world use in a time when half dollars were already fading from circulation. The design features of the 1992 D. Kennedy half dollar remain consistent with the long-standing series. The obverse still features Kennedy's left-facing portrait with Liberty along the top, In God We Trust flanking the neck, and the date, 1992 below. The portrait remains strong and recognizable, and in fine condition, most of the design elements remain intact with light were on the highest points. The reverse continues to display the presidential seal, with the eagle, shield, stars, and inscriptions unchanged. While the design itself had become familiar by this point, collectors often examine subtle differences in strike quality and surface finish between different mints and years. Denver Mint coins from the early 1990s are known for relatively clean strikes, which enhances the appeal of fine-condition examples. The composition of the 1992 D. Kennedy half dollar is copper-nickel clad, with no silver content in circulation strikes. However, it's important to note that 1992 was also the year the U.S. Mint introduced 90% silver Kennedy half dollars in special collector sets. This often causes confusion among new collectors, making it essential to distinguish between regular Denver Mint circulation coins and special silver issues. The 1992 D coin we're discussing today is the standard clad version. In fine condition, the 1992 D Kennedy half dollar shows moderate wear, typically visible on Kennedy's hair, cheek, and jawline, as well as on the eagle's breast and wing tips. Despite this wear, the coin maintains a balanced and attractive appearance, with clear lettering and no major distractions. Fine-condition modern Kennedy halves are often undervalued, but they play an important role in complete circulated grade collections. Looking at mintage, the 1992 D Kennedy half dollar had a substantial production figure, with tens of millions struck. This high mintage suggests availability, but availability does not always equal collector interest. Many of these coins were never circulated and remain in mint sets or storage. Coins that actually circulated and survived in clean, fine condition offer a different kind of appeal, one rooted in real usage rather than untouched preservation. When it comes to market value, the 1992 D Kennedy half dollar typically trades at or near face value in average condition. However, fine condition examples with smooth surfaces and minimal marks can attract modest premiums from collectors assembling date and mint sets. While it may not be a high dollar coin, its value lies in completeness, condition, and long-term interest as modern coinage continues to age. The most exciting potential for collectors lies in errors and varieties. The 1992 D Kennedy half dollar is known to exist with various minting errors, including off-center strikes, clipped planchets, weak strikes, die cracks, and occasional doubling in lettering. While dramatic errors are rare, they do exist and can elevate the coin far beyond face value. Careful inspection is key, as many valuable errors are subtle and easily overlooked. Collector interest in the 1992 D Kennedy half dollar has been slowly increasing as collectors turn their attention to modern-era coins. As older silver issues become more expensive, collectors often explore later dates to complete sets or study minting variations. The 1992 D fits perfectly into this growing niche, offering affordability, availability, and the possibility of discovering errors. In fine condition, the 1992 D Kennedy half dollar represents the quiet persistence of a classic American coin. It may not carry silver or dramatic rarity, but it tells an important story about how U.S. coins evolve, circulate, and eventually become collectibles in their own right.